Science First says, I think the Reverend got the idea of Jesus from the Bible and what he's learned from others. Sure. He then makes it his own version of Christianity. Yeah, okay. We all kind of do that. Every faith requires us to do that. I mean, the idea that any of us would have the understanding is complicated and not complicated. I think it's impossible. Every priest is going to have a slightly different understanding of the religion. Every denomination is going to have more significant, different understandings of the religion. At the end of the day, really, so in theology, just share this with you as a person of science. In theology, there's something called the regula fidei. Now, the regula fidei, in English, it's the rule of faith. Okay, the rule of faith is this innocuous kind of big cloud, shifting, ever shifting over time, and as cultures come and go and empires fall, we have this cloud where within we have our general understandings of the faith, the things that are acceptable within the faith. So the things that are acceptable within, and by faith, I mean the total church, the church universal, not any one particular denomination, but the church universal. And inside that regula fidei, there's going to be all kinds of understandings. And what matters is that our theology, as we develop it for ourselves, can find its place inside this regula fidei. Now, the rule of faith is something, again, we talked earlier about peer review. Well, in theology, there is a thing called peer review. And that peer review is done by academics and by scholars and by theologians, all of it. And they will say, no, these are the things that we think are acceptable, and these are the things that you're really in the gray area here, and these are the things that are completely way outside the circle, and you need to let this go. All right, but everything else in here are things that you can. There's safety in it because there's a large group of people who believe these same things. You're not the only one who's creating. So when you say making up my own version, no, I'm not making up my own version. My idea of Christianity comes from my denomination. It comes from the teachers that I've had, from the ministers that I've worked with, comes from the books that I've read. It comes from the preachers and from the sermons, from the rabbis whose feet I've sat at. But all of it would find itself within this big, ever-shifting rule of faith. There are things that are being written today theologically, things that are being posed and offered today theologically that 200 years ago would never have fit inside the rule of faith. They'd have been cast out. There are things that were written 200 years ago that we would have nothing to do with today, that would not find its way, that at one point was acceptable inside the regula fidei. Today we would say, no, it's not okay. It's outside the realm, right? But it's all there. I think sometimes as people look from the outside or even from the inside, really for that matter, I think sometimes some people will look at the faith and say, it's all supposed to be exactly the same. And if it's not exactly the same, what we need to do is we need to find these outliers because they're doing it wrong. We need to find these outliers because they're creating a Christianity all of their own. We see that a lot with fundamentalism. And for what it's worth, I see it a lot with anti-theists. I'm being careful because it's not something that an atheist might say to me, but an anti-theist, somebody who's offering an apologetic to disprove God. They would say, well, you're not all the same. And since God is this, why aren't you all the same? You should all be the same. We have a great prayer in our Eucharistic, a great line in our Eucharistic prayer, and it says, God created all things in wonderful diversity. God created us all. And I think that's kind of a touchstone for me. We're not all the same. Not every Christian has the same understandings. Not every Christian has the exact same understandings. Within this chat, you're going to find Christians from many denominations, from many different places. They're not going to see things exactly the same. And if that's what you're looking for, that, well, if for a faith to be true, it must all be the same. Well, then I guess the faith must not be true, and we'll never be able to offer that to you. It's just not. It's not possible. All of us come at this with different interpretations and different ways of seeing things. None of us are all completely, we're right on board here. We got this. Everything is straight now. No. Again, for me, the question isn't, to address that statement, the question isn't, am I in line with everybody else? Because if I'm not, I must be making this up for myself. My question is always, am I within the confines of the rule of faith? Are there theologians out there that I can back up my understandings with? Are there ministers out there that I can learn from, that I have learned from, right? Are there peer-reviewed theological articles that I can look at? Are there PhDs out there who are sharing things, and am I within what they have to say? Am I close? I gave up long ago. I gave up long ago trying to be a person who was completely in line with every other person of faith, for two reasons. Number one, it's impossible. Because every time I come into it, meet a different priest, every time I meet a different minister, every time I meet a different Christian, there's something just a little bit different. I can't find my way to be perfectly in line with all of them. That would make me that would make me crazy. The other reason is I want to explore. I want to explore God. I want to find God. I want that moment, like, some of our charismatics. Some of the charismatics that we would know about from our church history, some of the charismatics of today, they have these moments of ecstasy where they just for a second come across a new thought, a new possibility, and it gives them life. And I don't know if you've ever had that kind of experience where you come across a new thing and it just, it shines a light everywhere. And you see so much of your life in a different way, and things that never made sense to you in the past, they all of a sudden, maybe only for that second, they make sense. And so you search for that, and you search for that message, that lesson, that understanding that makes the moment last longer and longer and longer. You search for that moment and that message and that understanding that shows you just another little aspect of God that maybe you didn't have before, you didn't have as clearly before. So like I said, I don't worry about trying to be in line with every Christian, and am I making it my own version of Christianity? No more than anybody else is, and all of us, just by virtue of having this gray matter inside of our skull, all of us do it to a certain extent. The rule of faith is what you go with. What are the scholars saying? What are the theologians saying? What are the priests saying? What are the ministers saying? I can say with you that, I don't agree with Greg Locke. But sadly, a lot of the stuff that he says can be found within the rule of faith. Not all of it. Some of it he's way out there, but some of it is. Anyhow,